Yeah, I think there's a couple components. One of the things we're best known for is our diversity of classroom. In the MBA programs in particular, the current class is actually 98% international, and of the class, 75% of our students are actually non-EU citizens. So most of our students are coming from outside of the EU. Part of that is because of the English nature of the country. I think the job market is very strong for people from outside of the Netherlands and from the EU. Also, the English-speaking nature of the country is another thing that I think is the reason for that. So diversity is definitely one of the things. RSM has also been known historically for our approach and our commitment to sustainability. We've, over the past 2 years, kind of broadened that scope to not just be about sustainability, but also basing our mission statement of being a force for positive change on the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And so looking at things like access to education, access to clean water, building sustainable cities as part of the curriculum and part of who we are. So I think that's another thing that really makes the program stand out. Yeah, the first one that I would definitely want people to be aware about is our approach to developing people as leaders. RSM was one of the first schools back in the mid-2000s to really implement the notion of leadership development alongside the academic component of an MBA program. And over the years, we've worked very hard to really be able to solidify that. And we call it personal leadership development. It's really based a lot on emotional intelligence, and through leadership retreats and coaching sessions, individual coaching sessions, group coaching sessions, we really work with students to prepare them to become better leaders. Because obviously, to become a great leader, you do need the academic background, if you will, to be able to understand the different challenges that you'll face. But of course, businesses, at least for the foreseeable future, are run by people and are staffed with people. Of course, that might change as automation really comes into play, but you're still going to need to be able to lead teams and to motivate teams to get the best out of them. And the PLD program that we have that starts pretty much the very first day of the class and runs all the way through the end of the program is something that really stands out for our alums when you speak to them and you ask them, what really made a lasting impact for you. PLD is typically something that comes up, and so I would definitely point to that as being one of the big things. We also have a living management project, which is a 4-week-long consulting project. So it's a live challenge, if you will. We bring in outside companies, and the students work together in groups to solve different business challenges. So they meet with the executives, they see what the challenge is, they work for several weeks together as a group, doing company visits, and then eventually the kind of all pointing towards a presentation that they give with their recommendations to the executive team. And sometimes those ideas are actually implemented. Not always, but sometimes. So I think that for those students who are looking to get into a consulting role, especially if they don't have a consulting background, this is another impactful part of the program because they really get a chance to have a taste of what it would be like to go into one of those roles. That part of the program is actually led by an ex-McKinsey person who has the real-world experience to act as a mentor throughout that. Moving forward, we're piloting something this year which we're excited about, which is kind of a living management project 2.0, tying back to our mission statement of being a force for positive change. The idea there is a very similar concept, working instead of working with for-profit companies, taking the same concept but working for nonprofit companies and helping them to really push things forward and to find solutions to the different challenges they have. And that's something that we'll be implementing, like I said, later this year as a pilot, and then hopefully expanding that for the start of next year's class. So something to definitely watch this space for, and it's something we're excited about. But those are 3 things that I would point to as really making a difference in the experience that a student has if they did an MBA with us here at RSM.
Very interesting.
Profiles. The first question we always ask is, do we think the candidate can handle the program academically? So once we sort of determine that a candidate is in a position to be able to do well or to get through the program, then we start looking at the softer things, if you will. So we look at the different experience they have. If we're talking, let's talk ideal candidate for a moment, which isn't to say to your listeners if they don't tick all of these boxes that they're not going to be admitted to RSM, but these are the things that we like to see. International experience, that doesn't necessarily mean working outside of your country. We understand that that's an opportunity that not everyone is able to do. However, if you have clients that are in different countries, whether you're working via Skype or phone, or you're flying in and flying out,
Sure.
Having experience with different countries is important. There are some countries, obviously, that are so big that there's a lot of diversity within them. So that can also be something that we look at as well, that if you're looking with different cultures and with different languages and in different parts of a country, that can also be something that's good. But we also look a lot on resilience. How are you going to handle things? Again, most of our students are flying from or coming in from a long way away to do the program. And I can tell you that even some people who have very strong GMATs and very strong undergraduate GPAs and good track record, if they haven't lived away from home, if they haven't lived away from family, that can be an extra pressure that maybe they haven't experienced before. So we try to determine how resilient someone is, because that is another critical factor in success within a program, because it's not like you're coming here for a year of vacation, you're coming here for a year of intensive study. And so we want to make sure you can make it through. The last thing I would say is we really look and ask ourselves the question, can we envision this person in a classroom setting? Are they willing to share their experience? Are they able to self-reflect? So this goes back to the personal leadership development I mentioned before, but we look for emotional intelligence, which is something I'm sure a lot of your listeners will be familiar with. So the self-reflection, the self-regulation, are they willing to look within themselves to change? Because an MBA is a transformative experience, both from a knowledge perspective, but also from a personal perspective. So the decision that we made here as a group, was one, to have an essay question that was related to our mission statement, which is to be a force for positive change in the world. We really look for students who have that sort of within them. That doesn't mean they've had to have started an NGO, but we want people to know that that's important to us. Through that essay, because you can either, as you pointed out, you have two options, either to share with us what you have already done, or what the MBA from RSM will help you to achieve from an impact perspective. Otherwise, you're able to sort of show your personality there. Now, it is true that we reduced the number of prepared essays. However, one thing that we did add back in was video essay questions. So we used the Kira video essay platform, wherein students are asked 2 video essay questions, one of which is around cultural awareness, one of which is around resilience, where through the video, we're able to get a better gauge on their personality and who they are, especially if you're doing an admissions committee where, for example, maybe I interviewed a candidate and the admissions manager for that candidate is present, but the other people in the room will have never had any face-to-face or over the phone or Skype interaction. They're just a sheet of paper. So by bringing up the Kira video essay questions, we're able to put a face to an application, see how they think on their feet, see what their personality is like. So we have those 2 elements. And then the third part of the Kira is a quick written sample where students are put into the role, candidates are put into the role as the CEO of a company, and they have to communicate some news via email. And that can be good news or bad news. The whole idea is to see how people think on their feet, because I think that is far more representative of a classroom setting than prepared essays where you have many months to think about things. Typically, we see anywhere between 13 to 15% of our students being from India. It's one of a few countries where we do have to sort of monitor, what the overall outcome is going to be. We brought in almost, a year and a half ago, a new director of alumni relations, and it's been her job to really reinforce what we were already doing. We do far more events now, not only locally, but also internationally. We had an event in Cologne just the other night. We do events in Peru, we do events in Brazil, we do events in India, we do events all over the place. I will say that as it relates to India in particular, I think that a lot of our students tend to stay here, if I'm being honest. So we do have students in India who are alums, but a vast majority, once they come here, they stay here. Now, our alumni network is definitely stronger in Europe than it is going to be in Asia or India, but I don't think that that should necessarily come as a surprise. We have pockets, Singapore, Tokyo, places like that, but we're really stronger closer to Europe. And, I think that part of that is because people who are also attracted to RSM are attracted to the fact that they can find a job here afterwards. And so I think that in a way, the fact that we have so many alums within the immediate vicinity of Europe, it speaks to the fact that we're able to place people afterwards, whereas you might have other schools where, due to visa policy or what the job market is, students are having to return home immediately afterwards. And students who come to us will receive an 18-month student visa. Remember, the program is only 12 months, so there's an additional 6 months of visa when you're not even in a program. So if you haven't found a job, which 90% of our students have found a job within 3 months of graduation, you still have that 6 months. At which point, if you've still not found a job, you have a 12-month job search visa, which you were eligible for. So it's not a lottery. If you graduate from an institute of higher education in the Netherlands, you're able to get the 1-year search visas. So from a school perspective, one of the fastest ways that we're able to implement changes into the program is through our electives. The electives we can sort of cycle in and cycle out every year if need be. So when we're looking at things like analytics, artificial intelligence, fintech, things like that, we're able to bring it in through the electives. And so we're more rapidly able to address those changes that you're talking about. We also address that through our study trips. We have 9 different study trips, and they each focus on a different destination or theme. So for example, we added one this year that's in Iceland, and it's about doing sustainable business, and that's sort of in response to our changed mission statement. 2 years ago, we started Toronto, which was about fintech, cryptocurrency, blockchain, things of that nature. We also started one that's in Los Angeles, which is about digital transformation, also a little AI in there as well. So that's another way that we're more rapidly able to implement. Into the program itself, we've challenged over the past year and a half the faculty to do 2 things. One, to really implement the Force for Positive Change notion into the case studies they're teaching, into the methodology and what they're presenting. As it relates to the changing in technology, we are seeing people go into more digital-facing roles, especially in areas that haven't traditionally held that. I've also seen a lot more people going into roles that are more related to, and again, I hate to use this word, but I'll use it for now, sustainability. So things that are more CSR related than we have in the past. And I think that that's going to continue at least for the foreseeable future, where companies are trying to come to grips with listening to the voice of the consumer, wanting them to be more worldly and thinking about how they approach things in the world. And there's a demand, not only for the data side of things, that's clearly a demand, that's definitely there, but also from more of the CSR side of things, people who have a strong business background, but also have this desire and need to make a good social impact. So those are 2 areas that I see things changing. The first 2 terms are insanely intense. It's that trial by fire that bonds people together, especially within your groups, in a way that I think very few experiences can. Of course, as you mentioned, we do have clubs, and some of those are more passive, some of those are more active, whether that be the TEDx group that puts on a TEDx. We have private equity competition groups that host, private equity, case cracking competitions, things like that. And those also interact with other business schools. So there's that opportunity for networking across schools. We do participate in the MBA, MBA tournament, which is held in France every year. And schools from around Europe go and compete, which again is a blend of networking with other schools, but also having the opportunity to hang out with your fellow classmates outside of class, I think, is another thing. The study trips is another area where you're able to connect and bond not only with your classmates, because it's not just classroom activities, but during those study trips, our executive MBA students are also involved with those and attending those, so you're able to interact with them there. The students themselves have a lot of different things that they do, from the RSM Regatta. We have an International Food Day where people are making food from their home countries and sharing it with their classmates and colleagues. So we have that. You're really spoiled for choice, and I think that's one of the biggest challenges in a 1-year program, is sort of prioritizing what matters to you, especially from an extracurricular perspective. So those are some of the things that we have. There are probably some unofficial pub crawls every Friday and Saturday night. I'd be lying if I said that there wasn't that. And we have several places here on campus, especially in the summertime. People usually hang out and have, a beer, a glass of wine, or whatever. We have a very nice lake, and people hang out there. So there's a lot of different opportunities. But I think the bonding that you really get is the first 2 terms of the program, because it is so intense. And it's a shared experience because everyone's going through it at the same time. Those are things that I think definitely bring people together. There are more than enough jobs in English-speaking environments for students to be able to come in and work. The double-edged sword of that, if you will, is that being that the Dutch speak English so well, their expectations of what someone's English proficiency should be at might be a little higher than an average country where the English isn't spoken as much. However, most of our students who are coming into the program, that's not a problem. I will say that there's probably one exception to that rule. If you're looking to be in the consulting industry, especially at smaller consultancies, maybe not the big 4, but if you end up targeting smaller consultancy groups for experience that primarily work with Dutch clients, especially at smaller Dutch companies, even though they speak English, the language of the business might be Dutch. So in that particular industry, I think that sometimes language does come into a play. However, not so much for the larger consultancies, because they're working more with international clients where the language of business is English. So one of the common questions I do get kind of around this is, should I learn Dutch before I come here? And you can if you want to. It's not a requirement. We actually offer Dutch lessons on the 3rd term of the program. We have students applying for some countries where it's illegal to be from the LGBTQ plus community. That's illegal, and so it's not uncommon to have applicants. Not even really, and not that becomes part of the discussion necessarily unless they open it up. I mean, it's not a box you tick. I've had discussions with other schools about, well, do you offer that as an option for someone to self-indicate that they might be part of that community? To me, sexuality shouldn't be part of the conversation about whether someone should or shouldn't get into a school. If it comes up in conversation, which it has with me in several instances with candidates who are now students, sure, happy to have that conversation. But I don't think it's something that should be part of the application process per se. The Netherlands historically has always been known as a very open environment for people who identify in those particular communities. So from that perspective, I think it's nice to have that sort of background. And we did an article recently where one of our students, who was a gay male, had said, look, I didn't tell anyone that I was gay for the first 3 or 4 months, just to see how they'd react, just to see, and when I finally told everyone, it was like, it was no big deal to them. No one had any issue, nothing changed. And this is his words, not mine. So I think that the environment that we create is collaborative, it's welcoming. People can be who they want to be. Amsterdam has one of the largest pride parades outside of the United States. Right. And so I think that, just the overall sort of atmosphere of the Netherlands is that everyone is allowed to sort of, do as they please as long as they're not hurting someone. Okay. And I think you see that in the classroom too. Especially from India, the 2 most popular sort of profiles we see are someone who has the engineering degree or someone who has the commerce degree. Those are the 2 most common ones that we typically see. And you're right. I mean, if you're looking at things where you have someone who works for a large consultancy group on the IT side, strong GMAT, strong undergraduate GPA, and then you look at the next candidate, and again, we're just talking numbers. We're not talking about people yet. We're just talking about numbers. Sure. You bring up the next file, same thing. Strong GMAT, strong GPA, working for good companies. How do you pick? If you can only pick 1 or 2 or whatever it is. Right. It really boils down to who they are as people, and how they can articulate their story. And you might see this coming from consultants, but I can tell you from an admissions perspective, everyone has a unique story. Yes, we all, there are plenty of people who, my degree's in English, trust me, there are plenty of people with degrees in English, right, but they're not me, and I'm not them. And I think being able to identify those stories and really reflecting back through your life